So now we're going to talk about the second part, which is equipment. And obviously from the number of videos I do talking about equipment, I think of this as important. But at the same time, part of why I talk about equipment so much is it's actually really easy to do. And it's something where the items are not super obvious for a lot of people to know about if you haven't started trying to do a lot of researching into ultralight backpacking or backpacking and bicycle touring and the interplay of what you need for those three things. So essentially there's four general items that you have to sort of think of when you're planning your equipment needs. First, what are your needs? Second, how much redundancy do you need? Third, what are your resources that you have? And fourth, what are your own capabilities? So for one, you have to think about what your needs are for the range of conditions you're going to encounter, along with a buffer around that. A tour, for instance, a tour that stays within the same kind of climate zone and within the same season, or in summer, is going to be a lot easier to prep for and a lot simpler to prep for than a cross-country tour that goes over multiple mountain ranges and over multiple seasons. And it's important to figure out what your needs are going to be, because if you don't actually know that, you're going to end up stuck someplace and just desperately hosed. Yeah, so that's the basics of that. So for instance, if you are going if you're going, say, across Virginia, well, for that, a lot of the roads in Virginia are pretty well shaded, so some protection is good, but you don't need to worry about a lot of it. And if you're going in summer, well, heat's going to be an issue. If you're going in spring, then you're sort of a little bit better off as far as temperatures go. You're still going to want a little bit of a base layer if you're going in spring, because it's going to get chilly enough where you're going to need it. And you probably want to have one just in case in summer. But in summer, you're probably not going to need something like gloves. And so these are the kinds of things that you have to think about and plan out. And second, how much redundancy do you need? The greater the danger of having something fail or be inadequate is, the greater the amount of redundancy you need is. If you're far away from supplies, or if something failing is going to be just disastrous for you, then you're going to need more redundancy. You're going to need to be able to have the tools and the items to repair and replace stuff more than if it's not really that big of a deal if something breaks. If you're going out and back around the area that you live in a big circle, well, if it's only 50 miles from wherever you are to home at any one point, redundancy is not that big of a deal, as long as your family doesn't mock you too much for having to pick you up in an emergency. And yeah, so if you're farther away from supplies or resources, you need to plan for that. You need to have greater amounts of food, the ability to carry water. And for this, experience is going to teach you what you feel comfortable with. Having a long, cold night, having a long, cold ride that you're expecting to not be too bad, or having to sleep through a wet night, are both two very good teachers. And once you've experienced some things like that, you'll start to go, okay, I'm okay with this, or you know what, I'm willing to tough out blank, or I'm willing to tough out blank. And everybody figures out what feels safe to them. You don't want to feel unsafe. And so, what are your resources? Number 3. This includes, and this is the resources you can use for getting equipment and picking out what you want and getting the best kind of items. And this is going to be limited by how much time and money you have to research, plan, and purchase different equipment. And in order to be able to purchase the stuff, acquire the stuff that's most effective for you. From my research, I can tell you that I don't have what I think is probably the most effective stuff out there, but I have what works pretty well, and I'm pretty good with that. And I slowly improve what I've got over time and increase the quality of what I've got. And if you buy quality, then it lasts. At the same time, if you don't have much in the way of resources, you can always do things like, cat litter panniers. And so that third step is going to be really affecting whether or not you're able to figure out, like, you know what, I need a lot of compartmentalization, so I'm going to get these arcles, and they're going to have all these pockets, and that's great. Or I'm really all about just not having to worry about a bag cover, or leaves. That's what I want. And fourth, what are your capabilities? The greater your skills and the abilities that you have to deal with issues that come up, the less you really need to worry about equipment, because the same way that people who do a lot of bushwhacking, bushcrafting, are able to build things just with their knife out of twine and produce a lot of things for their needs. If you have good skills, you can deal with a lot of different issues that are going to arise. And so if you've got greater skills, say if you keep a couple of pieces of rope inside your toolkit, you're going to be able to fix and repair items that are going to break at some point. And that means that you don't have to have replacement for those parts. You can actually just make do with having that. And if you know how to boot a tire, you don't have to have a spare tire just with you all the time. And same thing with, you know how to do patch kits. You can just replace spare inner tubes. And so on and so forth. And so the greater the knowledge base you have, the more refined and careful you can be about what equipment you bring. When you're less experienced, you bring the entire kitchen sink. And when you're more experienced, well, you figure out, I don't really cook stuff. I don't need the stove. And you don't bring the stove anymore. I don't bring the stove on my camping trips anymore because I just don't use it when I'm by myself. And so that'd be pretty much the 4 major areas for equipment items, I'd say. And as always, if you have questions or concerns, feel free to comment or let me know, and I'll try to get back to you and help. Thanks. Bye.
Asshole. I was 10.